Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and we are here this week with a true legend of pro wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Barry Darsow, Smash of Demolition.
Joseph, thanks for the entrance here. I love it. I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm excited.
It's an honor to have you here, and when we announced that you would be coming on, the fans are excited. I've got a couple fan questions as well, so we're going to have fun with this, and obviously here to promote your book first and foremost. And let's get right into that. Let's talk about it.
There it is, right there.
There it is, Sickles, Studs, and Stolen Cars, the many faces of Barry Darsow. How did that come to be? When did you decide, you know what, this is something I'm going to do? And tell us all about it, where fans can purchase it.
Well, I never ever thought I'd be doing a book. I'm not the best writer. I speaking, I don't speak very well, but I think I get the point across. But over all the years, Bill and I, Axxess, we've been on the road pretty much every weekend, it seems like, and probably the last 6-7 years, so many of the fans have said, "Hey, when are you going to write a book?" You've got all the wrestlers from Minnesota and, all the different characters you've been and all that. You could tell some pretty good stories. And finally, just about, probably a year ago, I thought, you know what, I think it's about time to write a book. And that's how it all got started.
Awesome. And where can fans purchase that book?
On Amazon right now. You can get it there. And whenever I'm at some of the towns on the weekends, I usually bring a couple dozen books with me, and they've been selling pretty fast. So, it's I'm excited. It's a pretty easy read. It's about 300 and some pages, but there's quite a few stories in there from, growing up all the way on the road with, Rick Rude and Kurt Hennig and Ernie Ladd and Junkyard Dog. There's some good stories in there.
Excellent. Really looking forward to that. And we'll continue to push that here on the page. Thank you for, first and foremost, all your contributions in the business. And it's nice that now you have that all in a book and fans will have the opportunity
the hardest part is that I hardly put anything in there compared to what I've gone through. I mean, 35, 36 years in this business or around this business, I have so many stories, and that was the hardest part. What am I going to put in a book? So right. Some of the stuff that's in there, it's just, they're good stories and everything, but a lot of them I couldn't tell, but, sure. There's so much to write in a book, and, you get to a story and you can't really get into all the details. Otherwise that would be 300 pages. So you got to leave a lot of the stuff out of the stories and just kind of go through it. And it's kind of what's right at the top of your head at that time. So it's not the best stories I've ever had, but they're good stories.
Well, you've had such a lengthy and successful career. You'd have to come out with an encyclopedia series to tell your whole story.
Exactly. But now Bill and I, we are going to come out with a demolition book, and that's going to be, we're probably going to start that January, February. So I don't know how long it's going to take us to get together. And it's going to be just demolition and stories in the ring and around the guys and the guys we've traveled with. And we had a great time together with Mr. Fuji and Andre the Giant and Tito Santana. And, it just goes down the line. So Absolutely. That's going to be a good book.
Awesome. Really looking forward to it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that book towards the end of this interview. Let's get right into it. The beginning of your career, even prior to growing up as a fan, when did you first discover pro wrestling? Who were some of your favorites?
Well, when I was a kid, our whole family used to watch wrestling in Minnesota. And I remember we'd go to church on Sundays. I'd go early and go to, Bible study in the morning, and then you'd go to church, and then we'd run home as fast as we could to catch, Vern Gagne's show on in Minneapolis. So I started watching it at a very young age. And then as I got older, I was, went to school with Kurt Hennig. And then, I was a big Larry Hennig fan and, Vern Gagne fan and all these guys. So being around Kurt, we never really talked about wrestling or anything, but it was there. So that was kind of the introduction to wrestling back then. And then as we got older, we knew Kurt was going to get into wrestling. So then that's really when, the Road Warriors and Rick Rude, myself, and a few other guys, we thought, hey, we're going to get into wrestling right after him.
And Kurt Hennig, obviously one of the greats, one of the true greats in the ring, one of the best technical wrestlers, a great character, but behind the scenes, he was certainly a river, was known to be a river. Now, when you knew him in school early on, how was he? Was he like that? Was he always joking around or?
He was exactly like that all the time.
Yeah.
He was the happiest guy you ever seen and always having fun. And just if you were friends of his, he was the greatest guy to you. I mean, he was just a good guy.
Yeah.
And to me, I think he was probably, one of the top 10 wrestlers ever. And, and everybody, there's so many good wrestlers, but, I knew him and saw so many of his matches, and you couldn't beat some of his matches. Him and Bret Hart, holy cow, unbelievable.
Absolutely. SummerSlam 1991, a memorable bout to say the least between the two of them.
So how'd you remember that right off the top of your head?
One of the greats. I mean, one of the greatest matches, it really is.
Yeah. I could never remember, I can't remember half the stuff of my life, but
right.
That's huge to remember the date of that match.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to facilitate that. So, so, when it comes to getting into that business, when you're first getting involved, obviously, aside from your tight-knit crew of the Minnesota boys, who was the most friendly? Who was the most helpful when you're first entering the business?
Well, of course, Eddie Sharkey was one who trained us, all of us in, but along the line, there were so many guys. Ole Anderson, he came down to our camp. He was probably one of the first guys in wrestling that, really meant something to all of us to get us in the business. But of course, Kurt, Kurt gave me my first pair of trunks. And, a quick story with that. I just came home from Honolulu, Hawaii. I was working for Mrs. Maivia. And I came home and I told Kurt, I said, Kurt, I'm going back to Hawaii. I need a pair of trunks. You got a pair of trunks I can borrow? He goes, oh yeah, I got a perfect pair. So he comes into the gym, he brings me these trunks, and they're black with this red and white and blue stripe on the side of it. And I thought, God, these are great, Well, so I take these trunks and I'm down, wrestling for a couple of months or two. And then I get to the AWA and I was wrestling in one of the matches and Larry Hennig was there. Well, he ended up stealing Larry Hennig's trunks, some of his best pair of trunks.
Oh my
so
God.
Now he's thinking I'm up in their room at their house and I'm going through his drawers and stealing his trunks. So that was one of the ribs he played on me. So for so long, I thought Larry was going to kill me. I didn't even want to go over to their house. I didn't want to even talk to him. Every time I saw Larry, I just dodged him, went the other way.
Right.
So that was Kurt helping me out. But Mark Lewin, he helped me out a lot. I had one of my first matches with Mark Lewin. And then Ric Flair was unbelievable to me. I met him at the airport when I was going to Honolulu, and I ended up touring with him in New Zealand. I spent 2 weeks on the road with him, and that was a tough one.
Yeah,
and then there's so many, Dusty Rhodes and Ernie Ladd and Bill Watts, and so.
Now, when it comes to Bill Eadie, of course, Axxess of Demolition, when did you first come into contact with him and first meet Bill?
I met Bill in the Atlanta territory probably about a year after I was in the business. I wrestled at, I believe it was in the Omni, and he was in one of the matches in there, and I met him in the dressing room. But Bill knew all of my friends, and this was just when I got in the business, and I knew a lot of his friends already in that year's time. So we didn't see each other the whole time until I got back up to New York when him and I went out to lunch and we were talking about the demolition gimmick. So that was probably, 4 years later till I saw him again. But wow. The first time I met him was way, way back when I first broke in the business.
And you would go in eventually to replace Randy Colley,
Yeah.
who was originally playing the Smash character. From what I understand, the fans recognized him as one of the Moondogs, so they were kind of calling out his name throughout the few matches that he had as Smash. So they said, you know what, we got to bring somebody else in, and that's when they brought you in. At the time, of course, Krusher Kruschev, doing your big thing there with the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff, and a big part of the NWA. Now, when you arrive to the WWF, you've got your head freshly shaved. You take that very first promo photo from the Demolition from 1987. It's a black and white. Some fans still argue to this day that that's Randy Colley, and I was like, no, that is definitely Barry in there.
It's funny you say that because I've had people come up and Randy Colley signed it with my picture on there.
Right.
So he got a payday from that, and good for him. Good for him.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and it was funny when we first started, we didn't even know how to paint our faces or what to even do. So yeah, that was when you saw it all over, just kind of there. We didn't have a clue.
And how long did it take to kind of get comfortable with that and say, all right, we're going to try to keep the same look,
Well, it's probably after about 2 or 3 weeks, we kind of figured out, hey, we're going to use, pencils and draw it on. It was a lot easier than painting. And so it was probably 2-3 weeks. But, in that time, you've already had, 30 matches probably. So you've put it on and taken it off quite a few times.
Right. And when it comes to the paint, what type of paint did you use primarily? And how long would it take to apply? And how long would it take to take off?
Well, when we first started, we were using kind of a water-based paint, and then it would just run. It was terrible, and that's why it just looked so bad. And then we had my wife says, "Why don't you just use makeup pencils? What they do for like eyeliner and everything." So we just had all different colors of that, and then that's what we used. And then it seemed to stay on more when we were in our matches, unless your face rubbed against somebody's shirt, or body or whatever. But through the sweat and everything, it would stay on. So that's kind of what we stuck with, and we still use that to this day.
And let's talk about WrestleMania 6. Of course, WrestleMania 6, your victorious tag team titles are Andre the Giant, Haku, the Colossal Connection, Bobby Heenan at ringside. This is at the Toronto Sky Dome. This is, over 60,000 people, and this is in 1990. So the ovation when you guys won the tag team belts was just unbelievable. Any memories from that specific time?
Yeah, it was. They really worked that angle great because we were baby faces, and then it was kind of hard to become baby faces, even though the people hated us, but they liked us. But it was hard to completely turn baby face. And then we worked with the Brainbusters. We had quite a few matches with them. And we had the one match where Tully hit me in the head with the chair, and because Andre passed the chair. So that was kind of the start of the angle. And it was done right because we didn't work with them right away. We worked with other people, and then we had a few matches with them. But by the time we got to WrestleMania, everybody knew we were the baby faces, they were the heels. So they didn't think we were going to win, I believe. I thought, with Bobby Heenan there, they're going to cheat and we're going to lose again, and Andre and Haku are going to keep the belts. So the fans really didn't know, I believe. And when we won, it was like, hey, all right. And we were baby faces then. That's what really, really made us.
Yeah, that solidified it.
Yeah, and what was so great about it, and at that time, I didn't know that was Andre's, one of his last matches he was going to have. And he couldn't do a whole lot in the ring. And, Bill and I and Andre and Haku, we were all really good friends. We, talked together. We had beers together a lot of times. So we wanted to really take care of Andre no matter what was going to happen. And Haku was in the ring a lot. He worked his ass off. And he was so good. But it just, everything we did in there, it worked, even though Andre couldn't do a whole lot. And that's what was so fun about the match was everybody was working for everybody. Haku was filling in for Andre. We were trying to work the best we could with Haku without getting him so tired he was dying, and you got to keep him alive, and so it just like everything worked out really well.
And without spoiling anything from your book, is there any additional stories that you may have of Haku or Andre the Giant that you could share?
Gosh, there's so many of them. I mean, you know, I don't know. I with Andre, I used to play cribbage with him a lot in the dressing room, and we were going to Japan, and we were going to wrestle him and Giant Bob over in Japan, and we started this cribbage tournament, and I can't remember what town it was, but I was ahead of him, and we played like a nickel a point or something. It wasn't a whole lot of money, but it ended up being where I was like, $100 ahead of him. He owed me $100 in nickels, and Andre says, "Well, hey, let's play on the way to Japan." And I said, "Okay." So we go to Japan and we come back. That's when we pay up. And he says, "Yes, that's when we pay up." So we're on the plane and we played cribbage all the way. Everybody else was sleeping and I was so tired. By the time I got to Japan, I was about $400 up. And he was getting mad, and I'm thinking to myself, "Oh my God, what am I going to do here? I got to go in the ring with this big old huge guy. But it didn't, we ended up doing what we were going to do. And anyways, he was just laughing in the dressing room. He'd drink his wine. And so I didn't want to rub it in or anything, but by the time we left Japan, I was probably about $500 up on him. And he says, "Now we got the trip on the way home." By the time we got home, I owed him $100. And I've never seen, he was like a little kid when he was winning, all the stuff he used, it was so funny seeing the change from him being, really mad to all of a sudden he's like a little kid winning, and I didn't let him win, but he beat me. So by the time we got back, I owed him $100 in nickels.
Awesome. Now, two fans that have asked the question, Aaron Cushman, Kyle Corngay. These guys are New England natives here. So when it comes to New England wrestling, obviously the Worcester Centrum Center, the Providence Civic Center, the Boston Garden, then the Fleet Center eventually. But any specific memories from your time in New England?
The fans up there are just phenomenal. I mean, when you're a bad guy and you're wrestling up there, when you're a heel, the people just hate you. And I mean, they made it so easy for us to wrestle in the ring. When you get all the boos and all that, and there's not a whole lot you have to do and they're ready to kill you. It was so much fun wrestling up there. But one night in the Boston Gardens, I can't remember who we were wrestling, but they started throwing like golf balls or something at us in the ring. And then they were taking the nuts and bolts off the chairs and throwing the nuts and bolts at us and everything. And we couldn't believe that people were doing, but that's how much they hated us up there.
Right.
But great fans. We had a really good time up there and I love it. I really do. And I've been to Providence a few times. I've been to Boston a few times lately too. So, I can't wait to get back up there.
Yeah, it's gonna absolutely May the 2nd, of course, 2026. You'll be there with Ink Tank Promotions, with your partner Axxess, of course, Demolition appearing at New England Fan Fest. And that's going to be in Seekonk, Massachusetts at the Ramada Inn Hotel. You'll be doing the big dual photo op with the Powers of Pain, the Warlord, the Barbarian.
I love those.
Yeah.
Oh,
fans are looking forward to having you guys out there. And
we used to go to Revere Beach, and there was a place there where we had lobster rolls. They were just phenomenal, right off the beach, a little corner building. So it'd be midnight. You'd be so tired. You traveled all day. You wrestled and everything. And we had to get down there to get those lobster rolls. Food was incredible up there.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes we take it, advantage of it. We take it for, what do you call it?
You take it for granted.
For granted, yeah. Sorry. So, we're used to it, but it really is good food out this way. And the flip side of that fan question, any specific memories of Smash working with Hulk Hogan?
Smash working with Hulk Hogan.
Or maybe even if not in the ring, maybe behind the scenes or whatever,
Well, I tell you, Hulk came to me one day and I was down in Florida and he said, "Barry, we got a day off." He says, "Hey, you want to go on my boat here, tomorrow?" And I said, "I don't know. Let me check because I got so much stuff going on, interviews and all this." And so I called him up. I said, "Hulk, yeah, I'm going to come." He says, "Well, get Rick Rude and why don't you and Rick come on my boat and we'll just spend the day down at the beach and everything. And we went over to his house. We got in his boat. We had an incredible time. I mean, he had this freaking boat. I don't know. It was a cigarette boat, and I don't know how many motors it had by it, but you had to stand up and lean against these. And he'd hit these waves. We were going 50, 60 miles an hour out in the ocean, down the beach and everything. And you know, Hulkster was just a great, great guy. You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe when he passed away. That just was right out of the blue. But
Right.
you know, just being around him, he was, you know, he wasn't, you know, to me, he wasn't, you know, like my friends like Kurt Hennig and all these guys. He was a friend, but not a close. I didn't call him and say, hey, Hulk, you want to go out to eat all the time and all this. You know, it wasn't that kind of a relationship. But you know, we talked all the time, and um, you know, we were partners a few times in the ring, and he just let you do whatever you wanted to. You know, we had a, I think it was one of the, I don't know which match it was. It was me and Axe and Jake and Hulk. I think it was the Rosemont Horizon, and we all did interviews and everything. And it wasn't like he took the whole interview or he said, "Hey, you guys put me over." You know, he put us over. You know,
Yeah.
that's how he was. He was just a good guy. You know.
Any memories you could share from your time in Japan? Any of your tours there?
Oh, one of the best times I ever had. Well, there's been so many of them, but um, one of the first times I went over there, Brad Ringens was on the tour, and we went over there for Baba, and we were there for probably, I think it was about 2.5, 3 weeks. So we were in all the small towns where nobody spoke English, hard to get any kind of really good food. You know, it was just a little bit of rice here and there. You know, and we were in one of those towns. I can't remember what it was, but Brad says, "Hey Barry," he says, and I think Nikita was with me. It was me and Nikita. We were partners there. He says, "Hey, you got to come. We got this restaurant here. We'll get the food to go, and we're going to go up on the top of the building." And I'm looking at him going, "What are you talking about?" Well, we got the food. We climbed up the stairs, up this ladder and everything. We were on the top of this building. It was probably about 10 stories. And we were up there eating sushi and rice and drinking beer and everything in the middle of the day. And it was just gorgeous out there. And you could just see the whole town from this place. I mean,
Yeah.
that was an incredible memory. And Brad probably doesn't remember it, but that was my first tour over there. And, you know, after that, I really learned how to be in Japan and enjoy all of the local stuff that was there, you know. And I just love Japan. I want to go back.
Yeah. And the bond and friendship that you've created over the years with Bill Eadie, with Acts of Demolition. What is your biggest takeaway of your friendship with Bill over the years?
Well, you know, I've had quite a few partners who I have loved every one of them. You know, Nikolai Volkov was one of my first partners, and you know, then Jim Neidhart, and you know, Nikita and Ivan, and every single partner I had, I learned. And when I got together with Bill, that was kind of my final learning. You know, and even after we were together so long, I still learned from him, and I'm pretty sure he learned from me too. But he was kind of like my big brother. You know, he's what 10, 11, 12 years older than I am, and I was, you know, all the years in wrestling, I'd go out and drink beer and be with the guys and party and do everything. So by the time I got up with Bill, Bill already did all that stuff. So he was the greatest partner for really bringing me to reality. You know, this is a job. You make your money. You got your family at home. You work out. You stay in nice hotels. You eat right, and you get off the road and go home. And that's kind of what the big takeaway with Bill. He was like my big brother and
Yeah.
and best friends, and he really grounded me, and I really learned, you know, my profession. And that's
Yeah.
what Bill taught me.
And when you're on the road all these day in and day out, and you're trying to eat well. Obviously, sometimes you can't, but you always stayed in shape. As Demolition Smash, what was your training regimen? What did that look like?
Well, it was so hard because, you know, we had the belts for a long time, over a year the one time. And usually when you have those, you're on second to last, or a lot of times you're on last. And so you'd get out of the building at, 11 o'clock at night, a lot of times. And you'd get to the hotel, and we're always on a 6 a.m. flight. They always got you on a flight. In case you miss that flight, then you can catch another flight to the town. So by the time you'd unwind, you'd have, 3, 4 beers, and you'd eat a little dinner or something. It'd be 2 a.m, and you'd sleep for, an hour or two, and then you'd have to be at the airport. So you get on the plane and you try to sleep, but you couldn't fit in the chairs, and in the seats. It was really hard. So you didn't get any sleep. And then you'd get into the town so early, you couldn't get into your hotel room. So you'd get a good meal, a good breakfast right when you get in. You're so exhausted. You'd get the rental car and we'd go straight to the gym. And then you'd train for an hour or so. And we were really into doing a lot of the Stairmaster because we never wanted to blow up in the ring. We always wanted our opponents to get tired, not us. So we were on that Stairmaster for a half hour probably every single day. And then you'd do your weights and everything. So then by the time you'd be done, you'd go back to the hotel, you'd get a little lunch in you, and then you'd take your nap for about 3 or 4 hours. And then you're all ready to go. You'd leave for the building, 4:30, 5 o'clock. You had to be there. And then now you got, 3, 4 hours where you're playing cards or doing what you're doing, get a snack while you're there, and do that every night. And that's kind of what it was. But you never missed the gym, ever. And you always tried to eat right. And the times whenever you didn't go to the gym, it seemed like that's when you'd get hurt. And that training really helped you. And you couldn't go heavy training. It was a lot of reps and just getting a good pump. And that's kind of what it was. And then before you go in the ring, you had to train just to warm up again. So that was every day.
And specifically as Demolition, what would you say is your favorite tag team match?
Boy, there's so many of them. But I think, we had great matches with the Hearts, great matches with the Bulldogs, the Brain Busters, the Warlord and Barbarian. We had really good matches with those guys, and that's what's funny is because we had matches with the Road Warriors, and they were okay matches, but the Warlord and Barbarian, it just seemed like it worked so much better. And with us, we worked better with smaller guys than bigger guys. That's kind of usually how it was, because they could sell like crazy. Then when they came back, we flew for them. That's when the people popped. But for some reason with the Road Warriors, we didn't have, top-notch matches. And they were probably one of the only teams that we didn't. But, the other matches were phenomenal with the other guys, But there were so many more. There's so many more guys that we worked with, too, that were great.
Sure. Yeah, was there ever a specific memory maybe that was on a house show? It was non-televised, and after the fact, you're like, man, I wish that was on TV. I wish more people saw that moment,
Well, it was a lot of entertainment back then. Not like now, but there was 1 week where it was Demolition against the British Bulldogs. We were on the East Coast, and there was only 4 matches on the card, and we were at all little high schools down the East Coast. And I had more fun. It was the most fun I ever had in the business, and we made a ton of money in that week. And there was one of the referees, his name was Bucky, and his son, his name was Eugene, and he was a special needs kid, but he knew everything there was about wrestling, and he always brought your gear back to the dressing room. So we'd go out there, take our masks off and our leather, and he'd grab it and he'd bring it back to the dressing room. It'd be folded just perfect and right on your bench where you were sitting, every night. And that was everybody. So the Bulldogs were big ribbers all the time. And everybody on that East Coast knew who Eugene was because he's been around the business forever, and Bucky was the referee. So the Bulldogs had this idea. They said, hey, Fuji's not here. Why don't you dress him up like Fuji and he can walk you to the ring? And we thought, this is great. This is going to be fun. So they got him a top hat and put a coat on him and got a cane for him. So we said, Eugene, you're going to walk us to, and he was so excited, just, he couldn't even talk. He was so excited. He says, now you come out there. You're our manager. So he walks us to the ring, and they play our music. Boom, boom. Here comes Axe. Here comes man, and here comes Eugene walking out in front of us, and the whole crowd. This is a sellout crowd in high school. That's Eugene, So the people, were going crazy. So he walks us to the ring, and he gets in the ring, and he starts, shaking our hands and saying, "Come on, have a good match." So then now the Bulldogs come to the ring. The Bulldogs get in the ring, and they got their dog with them. And Eugene looks at us, and he goes, "Heck with you guys," and he went to the Bulldogs. So now he's their manager. He stiffed us.
Right.
So then they sent the dog after us, and the dog's chasing us around the ring. We jumped out of there. The crowd went, freaking crazy. It was one of the best nights ever, and it was completely entertainment. We had a week where we were at the beach every day, good food, good restaurants, no pressure, and that was one of my best times in wrestling.
And when it comes to famous ribbers, Kurt Hennig, Mr. Fuji, like you mentioned, do they ever rib each other, or are they always ribbing others? Do the ribbers actually rib each other?
I don't believe they did, or maybe at the very beginning they ribbed, and then somebody else ribbed back, and then they said, "Hey, the white flag," kind of a deal. But the ribbers didn't really rib each other very much, And if they ribbed us, it was a fun rib. It wasn't a serious rib,
Sure. Now, any cities or towns that come to mind when you're talking about travel? Anything stand out, or there'd be a certain spot to eat, and when we're going to this city, we got to hit this spot? Any favorites?
Oh yeah, in San Francisco, we always went to Chinatown. Fuji would always get us over there. Sushi restaurants. We hit every sushi restaurant, I think, all over the world. And a funny story about that, it was Bill, Fuji, Haku, myself. We went to a sushi restaurant that was over the San Mateo Bridge, over kind of by Oakland. And they had, when you go in the restaurant, they had like a little river around the bar. And then they had floating boats. And then you pull the plate off, and you got all your sushi. So we're all lined up on this bar. And I looked over, and Haku had a stack about that tall of plates, and I'm trying to catch him, and mine's about this stack, now his is up here, and mine's, and this guy, it was like all you could eat for, $15 or something, and the guy was starting to get to where he'd only put like one piece of sushi on the plates because he knew we were going to grab them. But that was probably one of our favorite restaurants, and Haku could eat some sushi, I'll tell you. Well, all of us could, but he ate more than anybody.
And early on, obviously, one of the early Royal Rumbles specifically, Demolition, one-on-one in the ring. You drew number one, you drew number two. What was that like, kind of working with each other when you're not used to that?
Well, it was unbelievable because we didn't know we were going to work with each other. That's what was so fun. And it was kind of strange because, everybody knew exactly when they were going to go out and what they were going to do and when they were going to get thrown out. But there was about 10 guys that they never told anything to. So we were waiting, and and you got a huge show like that, you want to know what's going on. And I remember coming up to Pat Patterson and said, "Pat, you know what we're doing?" Or anything? He goes, "Oh no, I'll get right back to you." Well, then he's gone, and nobody's there telling us what to do. So now they're getting ready. Howard Finkel goes out there and starting the match. We thought, well, we must be on later or something. We don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, Axxess music goes boom. Here comes Axe. So I look at Bill, and I start laughing. I go, "You're number one. You're going to be out there all night long." We're kind of, he goes, yeah, thanks. So he goes to the ring, and all of a sudden, when he gets in the ring, somebody yells, "Smash, you're up next." I went, "What? I'm up next. I got to go against, what am I going to do?" So then my music went out, started going, and Bill thought that they made a mistake and thought that they just accidentally played the music again. Well, then he seen me walking out. So now I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I going to do with him? I can't just go out there and shake his hand or anything. Our gimmick is kind of just, let's just beat each other up and see what happens. Like a young guy with his older brother, I'm going to fight him out there in front of everybody. And that's kind of how it started. And And when we got there, we laughed. I said, "Are you going to hit me first, or should I hit you?" And he goes, "What?" I went, "Pow!" Nailed him, and then we went at it. But it was kind of funny because we didn't know Andre was coming third. And
Right.
when Andre came through the door, I looked at Bill and I go, "Well, we got a big guy coming at us. We better both get on him." And we laughed, and that's when Andre came in. So that was really smart of the office to do it that way because it got over.
Yeah. And of course, eventually you'd bring in a third member to Demolition, Brian Adams, known as Crush. Just some quick memories of Brian over the years.
Oh, Brian he was one of the funniest guys around. He was another one of those ribbers, all good ribs. And him and I, he was from Hawaii, so he did a lot of fishing, and he knew I did a lot of fishing. So we'd go fishing together. He took me out quite a few times. I got my first marlin with him, in fact, at the Big Island in Hawaii. We were staying with him out there. Um, you couldn't ask for a nicer guy than him, and I couldn't believe when he passed away that young. It was just incredible. And I didn't talk to him for a long time, and I saw him in WCW when I was down there later, but we just never really could get together with our schedules and everything. But yeah, he was a good guy.
And it's been great recently to see all three of you, with new action figures, with the Legends deal. What has that experience been like so far?
Well, we signed the deal. It's been almost a year now. It was right before WrestleMania last year, and they invited us to WrestleMania and to the Hall of Fame after we signed the contract. And we ended up going to the Hall of Fame. And when we got there, Bill and I didn't know what to expect or anything. And we had a car that picked us up and dropped us off in the garage at the hotel where it was at. We went up an elevator. We were kind of lost, like, what are we doing here? And nobody was around. And we went up an elevator, and the doors open, and then here's where all the guys were that were involved in the Hall of Fame. Triple H, Stephanie, Linda McMahon, everybody was there. And we sat down, and Bruce Pritchard was the first one to come up with it. And I know Bruce forever, and I love him. And he came up, we shook hands and talked, and he made us feel at home because everybody was busy doing their stuff. Then when he left us, I never met CM Punk, and CM Punk came up. What a gentleman. I mean, he was unbelievable. He sat and talked to us probably for 15 minutes, very respectful, talked about watching us over the years and thanking us and all this. And, and then it went on, Steve Austin was there, and, Nash and Undertaker. And it was like all of a sudden we were part of the whole deal again. It was really a good feeling. So then it was time to go out to our seats, and we didn't know what it looked like out there or, what was going on. So they escorted us out there, and here's the Warlord and Barbarian sitting there, and we're, hey, how you doing? And Haku and everyone. So then our seats were right next to those guys. Now these were like the middle seats in the worst airplane that you've ever been on. And here's four of the biggest guys sitting, we're like this, we're laughing, and we're probably 10 rows from the stage and everything. But just to be around everybody, and, it was fantastic. And that was part of signing that contract. And, then, now we got action figures coming out, and then they were talking about some video games and some different things. So, who knows what's going to happen from it, but, it's good to be part of that big, huge machine again, and I'm sure that's Triple H, I'm sure,
And when it comes to action figures, you've had classic figures with Jakks Pacific, you obviously Mattel now, and you've had the Hasbro figures. Why was it for LJN that there was an Axxess figure but not a Smash figure? You weren't released together.
Well, they just came out with those, and I think it was kind of like a test run is how they were going to do it. And then they were getting ready to do mine and then a few of the other guys, and then they switched companies. So once they switched companies, then that was the end of that. So that they must not have had a very good deal with them. But
did you have a favorite figure line over the years?
Oh, I don't. I don't really look at them that close. I just whichever one's gonna sell the most and the one that the most of the fans have that we can sign again, and those are the ones I like. But
When it comes to fans, oh, go ahead.
and I think right now there's probably, I think 4 of them just came out within this last month. 4 new
Yeah,
ones, all different ones, and they all look really good.
they look amazing. Yeah, the fans are excited. I've seen a lot of the feedback, and it's great. It's just like you said, it's perfect for fan fests and different things. You could bring them there and get them signed, and just a great opportunity. When it comes to fans specifically, greatest interaction. Anything stand out more than the other? Maybe your favorite fan interaction.
Well, it's funny because for our whole career, both Bill and I, we were always the bad guys usually, and you never got to interact with the fans. And if you did, it's get lost, or you had to be that heel. And when you were in the WWF, there was no signing of autographs. There was none of that going on. So we were never with the fans. But then now that we're there, every town the fans are just incredible, and it's so nice to sit down and most of the fans got so many stories. They're bringing back memories that you don't even remember, and they know your whole life history. So not just one fan, but there's so many of them that are just very meaningful. All these fans, just to be around them, and you got to thank the fans, because without them there wouldn't be wrestling. And I don't care, you may be the top guy making millions and get a big head and this and that and think you deserve it, but if the fans all of a sudden turn on you and don't even pay attention to you, you ain't gonna make any money anymore. You're gone. So the fans make you or break you.
And I see you have a lot of merchandise and different keepsakes behind you. Is there a keepsake that stands out from your career? Maybe one item that you just cherish. It's very special to you.
Oh man, there's so many of them. This one right here, this picture with Ivan. We were together. Right before he passed away, and we were talking, and I said, Ivan, can you sign this picture for me? And I never really talked to the guys and say, hey, can you sign this for me? But I loved Ivan. Ivan Koloff was just unbelievable. So that means a lot to me. I got belts, and I got action figures, and I got so many different things, but that kind of stuff is what I do. So I got pictures with Nikita and myself, and Bill and myself, and all my different partners, Jim Neidhart, myself, Nikolai, and me. Those are the ones that mean the most to me. And then here, I got a good one right here. Here's one of the fish I caught. So that's me and Brian Adams.
Oh yes, wow,
right there. Yeah, that was in Hawaii. We each caught a marlin that day. That don't happen very often.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
Yeah. So
what are your memories of Gorilla Monsoon, the Lake Gorilla Monsoon?
Gorilla, he was tough. He it wasn't like we went out and went to dinner or drank beer, and it was all working with Gorilla, and he'd come back in the dressing room and say hi and everything, and really nice guy and everything, but he was business all the way. And when he was at that Gorilla position, which they still call it the Gorilla position, he was in charge, and whatever he said, you did. And he had that voice. But Gorilla liked me because Joey, his son, Joey Morella, I was friends with Joey, so I was around Joey a lot. So he liked me, and I think he thought that I was going to rub off on Joey a little bit, but that didn't happen. Joey was Joey. He had a good time, but Gorilla was a good guy.
And with your tag teams excluded, if you had to come up with a Mount Rushmore of tag teams, maybe your top 4 to work with, who would that be?
You mean all the way till now?
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough one. I think the Hardys, they would be fun to work with, and I think we'd have great matches with them. In our younger days, in our top of our game and the top of their game, I think we would have tore it up with those guys.
Yeah.
Now, I would never go on ladders or any of that stuff because I couldn't do any of that. But regular good hardcore matches that we could, have our match. I think we would have had some really good ones with them.
Yeah.
You know, or Shawn Michaels and Triple H. That kind of deal.
Sure. The early 90s, obviously, you would go on to become the Repo Man. One of my favorite characters as a kid, just a great character, great promos. And what was that like? For you, you're transitioning now from a very popular tag team. Was it inviting for you, or did you accept it at first?
Yeah, I loved it. It broadened my horizons of what I could do. I never would settle for just one thing. When every wrestling job I had, I watched the cameramen work. I watched the announcers. I watched, the ring crew. I watched the people in the truck. I tried to learn everybody's job, and that's just kind of how I was. So when I was a wrestler, I wanted to be able to. When I became the Repo Man, I really became that character, and to me, that was from being, a Russian sympathizer to Smash to now the Repo Man. I really enjoyed creating that character, and that most of the people didn't know who I was, and to me that was incredible. And when I was with Vince when we first did it, I told him, I said, I know this isn't going to be the top spot, but I said I don't want that. I said I want to be working with all the top guys, get them over, and then I don't have the pressure. I don't, I can just go have fun. And that's what I did as the Repo Man.
Yeah.
And I mean, I worked with everybody. It was phenomenal. I worked with all the top guys as the Repo Man, even took a chair from the Undertaker in the ring, and he gave me his finish, had the snake on me, Duggan, uh, British Bulldog, Kurt Hennig. I mean, what a great, great life I had.
Yeah. Gave you a whole new run, that you didn't
Right.
even see coming. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the Repo Man, when it comes to promos, how did you creatively come up with the gimmick, as far as the look, as far as the voice? Even it's completely different from Smash. The laugh, and how did that all come about?
Well, when I was Smash, it was kind of like I was mad at the world and I yelled and screamed at everybody and everything. And now I thought, what is going to be the voice that every kid's going to hate, And I just thought that if I did that, that people are, and you're stealing bikes from kids and kicking windows in of cars and all this stuff, and then you're laughing about it with the most obnoxious laugh. It's got to get heat with everybody, and I think it did. And kids were really, really upset with me,
Yeah,
and that's what made it fun. I mean, you did your job when you get that kind of response from these people.
yeah,
So that's kind of, it just kind of, the first video that vignette we did where I kicked the car window in, I kind of laughed about it. And then I thought, this is what I'm going to do,
yeah. When it comes to a day of pre-tapes, you're backstage, you're filming for all different cities and towns. How long does something like that go for each superstar? How long are you there doing that? And it could become obviously tiresome, I'm sure, after a while. But what is that experience like?
I mean, like that vignette, like kicking the car window in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it was on a day off and they tell you where to go. So you fly in because, you're at home and you go there a day early because then you're on the road the next day. So they end up having the camera crew and everything all set up ready for you. So when you get there, you get dressed, and then Vince or Pat Patterson or whoever says, "Here's what I want you to do." So with me, it was pretty much first takes on everything I did, even as Smash. Bill and I, our promos were just one take always. So when they told me what I was going to do, I said, okay, so why don't, they wanted me to break the window with that big hook that I had on that rope. And I said, well, why don't I just kick it in? It'll be better that and they go, can you kick it in? I said, well, shit, yeah, I can kick a window in. Who can't? They said, that's a car window. You can't kick that in. I said, you watch. We're going to do this all in one take. And I said, so here's what I'm going to do. I'll do this, this, this. I'll kick the window in. I'll go in there, and I got my coat on so the glass won't get me and everything. And they looked at each other and they went, all right, It's like they didn't think I was going to be able to do this in one take. And I said, we're doing it. So it's dark. We go through it. Went over, started. I kicked the window in, boom, made like I started the car, got in there and took off. And then that was it. And they all went, holy shit, he did it, So, it took a day to get it all to that spot. But then once we did it, it was a minute and 15 seconds. Yeah. So, some people, it might have taken a day and a half to even do that part.
Right.
But, when you see those vignettes where they, tipping over an ambulance or something in the back parking lot or anything, it doesn't take the guys very long to do it. It's the camera crew and getting everything ready, because the guys are professionals. They're good,
In and out when it comes to that part. Yeah.
So now, where are you at right now?
I'm in Rhode Island.
Oh, Rhode Island. Providence, by Providence?
Yeah, I'm in East Providence, so just about 10 minutes from the Civic Center.
Beautiful city. I love Providence.
Yeah, it's about 4:15 here, and it's a little kind of a sleet outside right now. We got some sleet coming down.
Well, we just had a foot of snow, and last weekend I was down in the WrestleCade in Greensboro, flew back to Detroit, and then I live 4 hours north of there. So I got in. I got in about 8 at night. It was snowing like crazy. I called my son, who's works for the deputy sheriff's department up here. I said, Dakota, how's the weather up here? He goes, Dad, get a hotel. Well, now I started calling. No hotels are available because it was snowing so bad. And finally, I got a hotel, so I stayed down there. But that's kind of my life story. I leave here 4 hours to get to the airport. Boom, 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 fly out, do it. Same thing coming home. So I got a tough life right now doing that.
Yeah, a lot of hotels in your career, that is for sure.
Great life, though. I can't complain. I love life.
You've traveled the world over and over, and it's been great. And you have so many fans out there. Of course, you came back as the Repo Man a couple times. We saw you in the 15th anniversary Monday Night Raw 15-man Battle Royal. We saw you in 2001 WrestleMania 17 at the Gimmick Battle Royal. What was it like coming back and seeing all the old faces for the first time in a long time?
That Gimmick Battle Royal was fun. I was in there for about 2 seconds, but, it was funny because I started a business with one of my best friends, and I got a call from Howard Finkel, and Howard Finkel, he says, Barry, and I used to talk to Howard pretty often, back then. He says, Barry, we need you to come in. And I said, Howard, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I got a business I got to run and all this. He says, no, you're going to have one hell of a time. He says, it's the Gimmick Battle Royal at WrestleMania or whatever it was in Houston, And I said, Howard, I don't want to go. And he says, are you kidding me? You really don't want to go? I said, no. I said, you can't pay me enough. He says, how about we give you $2,500? Just come down and be first class all the way. Have a good time. I said, Howard, I can't do it. And he says, well, I'll get back to you. So I hang up, and I told my partner, Tom, I said, Tom, they want me down there for this Gimmick Battle Royal. He goes, Barry, you got to go. I said, Tom, I don't want to go. I really don't want to fly to Houston, Texas. I'm out of that mode, and then dress up like the Repo Man and do all. That was a hard gimmick to do, Yeah. So then Howard says, all right, I'll give you $4,000. Come on down. I said, Howard, it ain't the money, And he says, well, it sounds like it's the money. And I said, okay, I'll come for $4,000. He says, well, no, if it's not the money, then I'll pay you the $2,500, So I said, Howard, whatever you want. I said, if you want me, I said, I'll be there. So I went there, and then, talked to Vince, and I talked to Linda McMahon, and, all my old friends back there. And I really did have a good time. And I'm glad I did it. But I can remember we're going through a walkthrough that I don't ever remember us doing that. So the Repo Man music goes, and the curtain opens up, and I run out of the curtain. I do my Repo Man deal, and here's Vince standing right there. I didn't know Vince was there, and Vince was laughing his ass off. And I said, "How you like that, Vince?" He goes, you look a little older than you did when you did it before, but yeah, it was fun. It was, it's always good to see the guys.
Two of the guys that were there that night, the Bushwhackers. Any memories of the Bushwhackers?
Oh, I just saw Luke last weekend. I love the Bushwhackers. Butch and Luke, we were very good friends. We were on the road together a lot. Had a lot of beers together, and you couldn't ask for two nicer guys. And you knew if you had a match with them, it was going to be the easiest match you ever had in your life. And they were the only tag team that we were out of character with when we wrestled. When they did their, they were over more than anybody doing what they did because the whole crowd would be doing it. How do you not, being two of the toughest badass guys in the ring, not get these guys over? You know what I mean? It was just that. Now, if we didn't like those guys, we wouldn't have done it for them. But we had good matches and we put them over. Yeah.
You said you were good friends with Joey Morello. What was he like behind the scenes?
Oh, he was a great guy. Great guy. He was a kid though. I was older and he was out having a great time, and that's what Joey did. And he was a good baseball player in his day. And he used to bring a couple of gloves, and I'd play catch with him. I was a catcher before, and he'd pitch to me, and I'd say throw it in there, and he'd say, "You sure?" And one time he threw it in there probably 90 miles an hour. I went, we don't need to go that fast anymore because my reflexes weren't like that anymore. But he was a good kid, great referee too. Now,
when you're in the thick of it and you're traveling town to town, full schedule, are you traveling solo? You're traveling with Bill? Do you have travel partners beyond that?
Most of the time it was Bill, myself, and Fuji, and then we'd take somebody else in with us. A lot of times Tito would travel with us, Cowboy Ron Bass, Sherry Martel, just stragglers that were around that wanted to travel with. We'd take them in, and then they'd go to the gym and they'd go to the restaurant with us, and they'd do exactly what we would do. We had more fun with Sherry Martel. She was just great. And Tito, I saw Tito last week, and I love Tito. And then when I was a Repo Man, I traveled with Rick Martel and Roddy Piper, and just different guys. I mean, it's just Joe. I have had the greatest life in the world. I mean, I tell my son that. I said I've had the greatest life out of anybody. I just love There's not one person I don't like. Even if I don't care for them, I still like them. There's always good in everybody.
Sure. And rewinding back to Hartford, Connecticut, this is 1990. It's the Survivor Series. It's a debut of The Undertaker. You see Mark portraying that role. Did you just think it was going to be another superstar, or did you actually see or think that Undertaker would go on to become as big as he has?
I knew it was going to be that big. When The Undertaker first came in, he wasn't The Undertaker, but we would go out, and him and Krusher were really good friends. And, at that time, all of us would go out and we'd have a few beers and everything. And finally probably after about a week or so, he says, I'm not going to go out right now. He says, they got a gimmick for me. He says, I gotta really get serious with this thing. So then all of a sudden, boom, he's The Undertaker. And when he came out and the music and everything, and he just looked the part. I mean, it was, you see some of the guys with their gimmicks and you go, that's not bad. But you see something like that happen. It was right away with the way he moved, how big he was, his look, everything. You knew it was going to get over. And when you've seen it, you see all of us guys, and then you see that. He stood out that much. It's like Hulk. It's one of those standouts. And, you knew it was going to happen. And it couldn't happen to a better guy. He was just a good guy.
Obviously, you went on to WCW, Blacktop Bully, the Hole-in-One, Barry Darsow. What did you think of your time in World Championship Wrestling in comparison to the WWF?
Well, I'll tell you, there was nothing like the WWF. I mean, that was the big leagues. And even though, later on when like the NWO got started and it got so big, it still wasn't the WWF. That was... it's a game changer when you go up there. But when I had the gimmick, the Blacktop Bully, I thought for sure that was going to be a long deal. I thought I was getting over good, and I thought that was going to be another part of my career, kind of like Smash, but only the Blacktop Bully. And
Right.
then when I got fired after that truck match, it kind of broke my heart after that one. And then I had time off, and I knew my career wasn't going to be anything anymore. So now it was just, okay, if I could get a contract, because they were giving guaranteed contracts there, if I could get that, then I'd be happy, because I knew they weren't working very much. And Eric, when he fired me, he promised he was going to give me a job back, and he did. And I came back, and I had a great contract, and I worked, shoot, probably 5 times, 6 times in a year. I mean, I had a great run there for that.
Yeah.
And I wish they would have re-signed me with the same contract. I would have loved to have had that forever, but
Sure.
at that time I felt really guilty, because I really wanted to work for my money, and I wanted a spot, and it wasn't going to happen again. So I knew that was going to be the end of my career then.
If you had to pick one moment that stands out, your favorite moment throughout your entire career, anything stand out that, that's the moment for you?
Me and Ivan Koloff had a match with the Rock and Roll Express in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And it was almost an hour-long match. And it was a hell of a match. The building was sold out. And we dropped the belts to those guys that night. And both Ivan and I were laying on the mat, and they won the match. The crowd went so crazy that it took the wind right out of the building. We were both laying on the match, and I looked at Ivan. I go, "Holy shit, Ivan!" And he looked at me. He goes, "Crush, that was the best match, And we watched the Rock and Roll Express go outside, and the whole dressing room came out and congratulated them for beating us. That was one of the most memorable moments I ever had.
Wow.
I mean, it was phenomenal.
What advice do you have for somebody that's looking to get in the business now?
Go to college and not get in. No. The biggest thing is you got to get to the gym, and you got to look good, and you got to look the part, and you really have to be an athlete, and you got to stand out, more than the other person, and it's your body, it's your look, your attitude, and how you can work. And that's what's going to get you to that next level. And, we go to a lot of towns where it's, the independent wrestlers are there. There's some of the guys that are just like, why aren't they up in why aren't they in New York? Why aren't they in, Florida at the training camp? And it's just, they just haven't got the break. And, it takes somebody from the office there just to see you, or the word from somebody, that knows somebody, and they look at you and they go, "Hey, this guy's going to be somebody." There's 100 guys out there, and 100 may not make it, but then all of a sudden one look at one guy and they go, "I'll take that guy." So the chances of making it to the big leagues are astronomical. But if you go out and have fun, and have a good time while you're doing it, that's what I would say.
And beyond your initial contracts when you were there, in the 80s and 90s, what did you see from merchandise? Were you getting checks from the action figures and the Coliseum home videos, the T-shirts? Were you getting extra on top of that, or was it kind of implemented into your contract?
It was, they kind of lumped it all in together. You'd get a contract for the action figures, but it wasn't very much at that time. And the guys before us, they were getting huge checks. I mean, 70, 100,000, 150,000. And we get in there, and now we're getting checks for 5 and 6 and 7,000, which, I suppose the guys got so rich, they kind of did whatever they wanted to do. And, the office wanted to hold you back, so they didn't want to make you rich. That was kind of their deal. Keep them down so they keep their job, And I think that's kind of what they were doing to everybody at the time. But yeah, we were, we had a couple of pretty good years, and, nothing like what they're making now. The position we were in back then, we'd be millionaires what they're making now.
Yeah.
But that's how it is.
Hypothetical question: If you never became Smash, if you remained as Krusher Kruschev, what do you think would have happened with you? What would you have gone on to from there?
I would have definitely gone to Japan right away, and I was already over there as Krusher Khrushchev. I would have went over there, and I was an American that liked Russians. That was my gimmick, and I would have really played that out, and I would have been a badass guy in Japan. And I at that time I didn't care if I worked in the States ever again. I really liked Japan, and if I could have got 6, 8, 10 weeks over in Japan a year, I would have been the happiest guy in the world.
Another fan question for you. Two guys start going at it randomly in the bar. Rick Rude, Haku. Who takes it?
Between the two of them?
Yeah.
Well, it would depend who got the first whatever in, but
Right.
Haku probably, with his size and everything, Haku probably, but here's what's funny. Everybody talks about all of that stuff all the time. You're talking about two guys that are the nicest guys in the whole world and wouldn't hurt a flea. And then you get these stupid idiot people, fans, that want to pick on one of these guys. It's like, what are they, mental?
Yeah.
You look at Haku and you go, you're in a bar and you're drinking, you go, I'm going to go pick on that guy. What are you, freaking retarded or something? You just look at him and he's a tough guy. Same thing with Rick, the face, it's unbelievable. But, two of the nicest guys.
Yeah. And let's talk about your book again. Obviously, Sickles, Studs, and Stolen Cars, The Many Faces of Barry Darsow. It's out now on Amazon. Anything else you can tell the fans as far as, maybe what they can expect in there?
Bill wrote the foreword to this thing, and I had tears in my eyes. I don't know if you've read it or anything yet.
Not yet, no.
But, I love Bill. He just, I started reading his foreword, and I'm serious. I had a tear in my eye. I really got emotional with it. And I talk about my mom a lot. I talk about, God in there. I believed in God my whole life. I've just, my brother was a big, huge factor in my life. My mom was so much help for me getting into the wrestling business. And then Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude and Wayne Bloom and Andre the Giant, Ernie Ladd, Junkyard Dog. I talk about all these guys in there, Dusty Rhodes, Mark Lewin, Ric Flair, how it went from working at the bar to all of a sudden, trying to make it in the business and making $50 or $100 to all of a sudden getting into territories and all the people who have helped me out in my life. And it just, I tried to let everybody know that it's really hard to make it in this world. You have to have help. And the help is what really got me going in this business. You know what I mean? It's just, there's so much people that helped me all the way along. And then I tried to help everybody else along the line too, and that's kind of what the book is.
Can't wait for it. I'm definitely going to pick up a copy myself. I encourage all the fans to grab a copy because it means to you so much on many levels, like you just said. So it's a great piece.
Joe, great podcast you got here.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Barry.
And I appreciate it. Yeah. And I'll see you up there in May, I suppose, huh?
Absolutely. May the 2nd, I'll see you in Seekonk. And in closing, fast forward many years from now, what would you say is your legacy? How do you want to be remembered?
Well, in wrestling, I just want to be remembered as a guy that everybody, liked. I thought that every match that I had, I worked 100%, and I got people over. They got me over, and I think, just how hard a worker I was, and whatever I said I did, and that was kind of, what my legacy is. I was honest, and I didn't lie, cheat, and steal. Well,
Barry, thanks so much. It's been an honor to have you here, one of the true greats in pro wrestling, and I consider you a friend, so thank you for being a part of this. For Barry Darsow, I'm Joseph Bruen. This has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, pick up Barry's book, and we will see you all soon.